Hello, Red Nail Energy listeners. This is Mikhail, and today I am joined in studio with Natalie. Natalie is an identity coach, breathwork facilitator, and Reiki practitioner. With an interest in food's impact on the body and mind, she started her work in the personal development space in 2020 by first becoming certified as a health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. In time, her interest started to veer more towards spirituality, energetics, and the mind-body connection, leading her to her passion today of helping women find themselves and connect to their soul. So welcome to the podcast, Natalie.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for our conversation today. We had the opportunity to initially connect kind of midsummer and just felt very aligned in our paths and our passions. And so I would love for you to kind of dive in, give listeners a little introduction about what first brought you into this space, and then we can chat about how it has transformed since.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited
of course,
to be here.
Me too.
I have always had an interest in psychology starting in high school. I just was very naturally interested in the mind and how it worked. And then I studied it in college, and after college is when it kind of sparked for me for multiple reasons. One, at the time I was working as a behavioral therapist for kids with autism. I loved that job. I loved the mental health side of it. I loved working with kids. And in time, I started to just take notice of what the kids were eating. And I made the connection of they are eating so many processed foods full of so much sugar. And I just had this intuitive feeling of, I feel like there must be some sort of connection. So there was interest on that side. And then at the same time, I was living my adult life right after college and just doing so many different things. And I started to get sick all the time. I would get a cold like every couple weeks, and it would wear me down. And after a while, I was just like, this is not normal. I know that this is not how life should be lived. And so then I was looking at food and just kind of how to live a healthier life. That's when I found that program, Institute for Integrative Nutrition.
Okay.
And that program really opened the door for me. One, in terms of food, but I loved their mentality on consumption. So I'll give you just an idea of what their idea is. And they say there's primary food and there's secondary food. Okay. Primary food is relationships, career, spirituality. And secondary food is the food on your plate.
Okay, I love that.
Right?
So much more holistic than just thinking about food as what you're consuming to like feed the beast per se, like keep your body alive. It's like looking at all of the other things in your life as what you're, consuming, honestly, every single day, media, relationships, all of that. So I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and I hadn't either. And so I loved that perspective. Excuse me. And so that really had me look at my life in a very different way. And, it's the idea of if these things aren't taken care of first, it doesn't matter what you're putting in your body. You will still not be living as well as you could. So with that program, I took a very wide look at my life, and I was able to see I am doing so much. And what had happened was my nervous system just got so overstressed, overwhelmed. And what I gathered from that program was the importance of slowing down. And then that's when my awareness really started of, like you talked about consumption, how am I spending my time? What is happening with my energy? What am I putting in my body with my food, with what I'm watching, with the people I'm spending my time with? What am I doing with my time? So that really just like opened the door for me. And after that, it was 2020, so the pandemic happened. And that course taught me so much, and it also taught you how to be a health coach.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So the world shut down, I lost my job, and I was like, okay, I'll give this health coaching thing a try. And I loved what I was doing. I loved what I was learning. But in health coaching, I realized I didn't feel this like passion. It didn't feel super aligned, but I just was kind of doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't know what
Trying
else
it
to
out.
do. Trying it out.
Yeah.
And then I worked with this mentor. She was a spiritual business mentor, and she really showed me a lot of higher spiritual perspectives. And she allowed me to see the world in a different way than I had ever seen it before. And that's when my spirituality really started. I was like, I like this. I love that, things that might be really painful or uncomfortable, there's meaning to it. There's purpose behind it. And I've always said everything happens for a reason. And I didn't really know why that was for so long. I couldn't really articulate it, but she showed me this path of, why things happen for a reason and kind of more behind that.
Oh, cool. I love that. I think it's so interesting to hear the first domino that falls for a lot of people. And then in turn, it becomes this whole snowball effect you never could have even imagined that gets you to exactly where you are today. But it's so neat that it started as, a job with kiddos that have autism. And then it kind of transformed into you zooming out and looking at your own life and consumption in the sense of primary food in a way that is so different from the way I've ever heard it spoken about. And that when we look back on things, it often does make so much sense. But when we're living it forward, as you said, you might have this deep notion of everything happens for a reason, but it's not often until you pause and look backwards for a little while and kind of look at all of the tiny little things that had to happen to get you where you are. Although some are so painful, you recognize if one of those rungs of the ladder was removed, you would not be where you are, which I think is just a really good reminder for anyone listening going through something hard or going through a time where it's just like, what's the point of this? Or like, why is this happening to me? I feel like we've all been there. And then especially right now as the seasons are shifting and we're really being called to slow down, it can be very confronting coming out of the summer season of like, go, go, go. It's light all the time. We're riding bikes everywhere. It's so fun. And then all of a sudden this shift happens and you're invited to maybe say no to some of those things that are external and like dive in and hunker down. And it's just so important to remember like every one of those seasons serve us and have such an important meaning in our life.
100%. I have so many things I want to say to that. One, I was on a walk today and I was just looking at the trees and, all the leaves have fallen off. And it's just a beautiful reminder of the trees go through their own death, and their own time of going inward and losing everything so that they can bloom again in another season. And it's so cliche, but it's so cliche for a reason. You know a little bit about my story, but I went through heartbreak a year and a half-ish ago now. And it was the most painful thing I've ever been through. And again, another cliche, I genuinely am so glad that it happened, truly, because it brought me so much more than I could have ever imagined and more than I could have ever received from staying in a relationship.
Right. Yeah. And if you could maybe speak to the Natalie that was experiencing that in that time of probably crying on the bathroom floor, so up in arms and wondering why this is happening, and to maybe anyone listening, what's the kind of takeaway or what would you say to that person or you're the former version of yourself that was like, it's never going to be okay again?
Yeah, I was definitely there. In pain that I didn't know was possible. And one saying that I love is my heart was broken, but my eyes were wide open.
Ooh.
And it's so true because there were these certain things that I just couldn't see when you're in it. And then when you are broken down so much, you see things in a different perspective. And it was pretty immediately after the heartbreak that I was like, oh, I see this about myself. Excuse me. I see this. I see this. And again, I wouldn't have seen these things. And the biggest, most glaring perspective that I took and that I saw right after was, and I remember saying to my therapist, I feel like the analogy is we were two lanterns. Okay. So he's a lantern, I'm a lantern. And I was getting the fuel for my lantern from his fuel That was exactly how I felt. And I intuitively knew that. And when he broke up with me, that fuel was gone. His fuel was gone, meaning my fuel was gone. And so immediately I saw I have to start lighting my own lantern and fueling my own self without him and without anybody else.
Yeah. And it's such a painful realization, but it's truly the only way I think that we can then build something that is unshakable and build a foundation that is something we're so proud of, because it can't be taken away, and not to become jaded, because I do think I've experienced, at least speaking from my personal heartbreak, sometimes there is a little bit of moment where you are kind of jaded in this, like, I don't need anybody. It's only me. And then what comes on the other side of that is this really beautiful interdependence of, I am so whole on my own, and I'm so thankful for all this other light in my life that surrounds me. And all the other light in my life is welcome, and it makes maybe my glitter glisten even better, and my light can make theirs glimmer. But I would still be able to cast a light in a dark room if I was completely on my own, which is often how it feels when you are going through those bathroom floor moments and it is like lights out. There is nothing left. And I think as painful and confusing as that can be, that very pain is often the exact alchemist to creating your own light and figuring out, like, what does that even mean, look like? Where do I start? Like, there's so many things that come up in that. But for you, like, what was the starting point once you had that realization that let you start to kind of slowly turn your own light back on?
It was first that realization of, I recognize that I have been using someone else for my light. And after I realized that, it was just a journey of, how can I build myself up? How can I build my self-worth up enough so that when something else happens, I am not completely broken and I am not completely shaken to the core, because shit happens in life. And I'm not saying I will never be hurt again or heartbroken again or whatever, but I will never be so devastated, because now my internal state is so much stronger. And I remember this distinct moment. I was talking to a friend a few months after it happened, and she was like, well, now you can finally, find yourself again. And I had the realization of, I actually never even knew who I was. So it doesn't feel like I'm finding myself again. It was, I'm finding myself for the very first time. And that journey was, honestly, a lot of it was based in subconscious work. So understanding, okay, why am I putting so much of myself and leaning so much on another person? Why is that? And that was looking at, okay, well, actually, it started from a TikTok video that I saw.
Okay. TikTok University. We love it.
We love TikTok University. And, when you're going through it, you are doing anything to get
TikTok
out of the
tarot.
pain.
Man.
Oh my God, dangerous.
The minute I start seeing TikTok
so
tarot,
toxic.
I'm like, something is wrong in my life. And then when I am lingering on the videos and I'm like, are they going to text me back? And then I'm like, no, get off this TikTok tarot. Am I going to have a good day? Is everything about to happen? Is this a tower moment? What's happening in my life right now? I'm like, okay, we need to change the algorithm because something is not okay if I am stuck on that. So that is, so funny.
That is so funny. TikTok tarot is toxic because when you're so desperate for something, you're like, okay, yes, this is for me. This is for me.
I'm like, how did they know that he once had a blue car? Like, this is crazy. Well, and I just think the algorithm is so smart because the longer you linger on anything, it will give you more with those same keywords and whatever. And so pretty soon I'm like, this is talking about my life for sure. This person 1000% knows everything about me. And if I'm watching this message, it means it was meant for me. That's what the girl said, this witchy girl. So I'm like, it must be.
She's like, if you see this message, it was meant for you. I'm like, yes,
it was. Yes, it was. That is so funny. Okay, so the video you did see was?
The video I saw that really moved the needle for me was about, in order to get over someone, you have to first understand that you are attached. And once you accept and recognize that, you look at, why am I attached? What is this person giving me? Okay, so then I thought about it. What was he giving me that I feel I so desperately need? Love and validation.
And sometimes, what are they not giving me that I'm jumping through hoops and exhausting myself trying to get from them? I think sometimes in that like rejection, redirection moment, part of the attachment is actually I never got the thing from them that maybe mirrored my childhood, maybe mirrored something from a caregiver. And I finally thought, if I can get them to choose me, if I can get them to love me, then I'm worthy. Then I have the validation. So I think it's like in that attachment moment and awareness, what am I getting from them or like trying desperately to get from them is huge.
Right. For sure. Looking at both sides of that token. And it was interesting because our relationship, there was a point where it shifted. And at one point I was getting all the things. And then at one point I stopped getting some of the things. And that's kind of where it starts to go downhill. But so I looked at that, and in the video, TikTok University says, but it really resonated, you know, and she was talking about how the reason you so desperately want or feel like you need these things from that person is because you are not giving them to yourself. And that's pretty basic once you get into that world, but I had never really heard that before.
Well, so it's like mind-blowing.
It was mind-blowing to me. And it was just the light bulb moment of, I have never given myself the love that I need. I've never given myself the validation that I need. So I went on this self-love journey. And I will never forget the first time I told myself, I love you, I started crying because I had never, ever done that before. And that was moving because I was able to see, oh my God, this is so powerful. And I have been lacking this for 28 years.
Yeah. And how easy it is to say I love you and give love to everyone else around you. And so because of that, it often feels like, oh yeah, I'm full of love. I'm a really loving person. I have so much love in my life. But until you get really honest with yourself and ask if any of that love is being given back to yourself, it will constantly be this thing where like something's missing. It's just not quite there. And I think that's a really beautiful realization to come to, because then the work can start. Then you can recognize, like, why is it so easy for me to give these things, and why do I so desperately feel like I need it to return from other people? You know, and what aspects can I give myself and fill myself up with first? And then everything else is just a bonus. It's not the need, it's not the lifeline, it's not the fuel. Instead, it's just, you can be a lot more honest too about what interactions feel like, because you're not trying to get your breath from them. You know, your life force doesn't come from another person, which is huge.
Exactly. And that's what's so valuable. And I think, you know, I learned this through a relationship, but people can learn it through different things. You know, like I said before, shit happens in life, and things can get taken away. Things can shift. Big changes can happen. And you know, it can be anything that you put too much of your identity in. That's when it's the problem. So it could be with a job, you know, and that happens a lot. I feel like people put so much pressure of who they are into this job, and then all of a sudden it gets taken away and their world is turned upside down. And it's just an invitation to look and say, where are you putting your identity? Because that's where it's time to bring it back to you.
Absolutely. And if there's anything in your life that it feels like if this thing disappeared tomorrow, I would not be me any longer, that's your exact clue. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't absolutely love your hobbies and love your friends and love these things. But exactly as you said, there are often areas in which our identity is almost being like transmuted into this thing. And if there's anything in life that it feels like if it went away, I would no longer exist, huge invitation to figure out why and just be curious about it. It's not a shameful thing. It's more just, what is it about this thing that I feel so identified by, and how can I figure out who I really am? Because it's like, I am not like writing. I am not just a dog mom, or whatever these different things are that maybe you do identify in, a girlfriend, a mother, these titles that we have. And then exactly as you said, professionally, these things that we maybe are deriving worth from, where when we do the subconscious work, we recognize, where did we not receive that affirmation, validation previously, and how can we figure out how to reconcile that within ourselves so that nothing in our life can hold that power over us, because it is a really scary place to be. And then so much of our motive comes from desperation, because it's like, if I lose this, I will not be me any longer. And we have all been on the receiving end of that type of energy. And like, even if it's not directly in my, ether right in front of me, I can feel it. I can feel when somebody is coming at me from desperation and I see their name pop up on my phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, like pressure in my chest, get this away from me. And I also admittedly know I've been that to people when I'm like, don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. Oh my gosh, what can I do? I'll jump through rings of fire. I'll jump through hoops. I'll perform. I'll do whatever you need. And that space is not authenticity at all. It is like putting every mask on that you think someone needs you to be, and the opposite of intimacy and connection, because you're just trying to like win it over and get this outcome.
I love that. And that's why I'm so passionate about self-worth work, because like you said, if you are confident and strong enough in who you are, yes, stuff on the outside matters, but not nearly as much as it does when you are basing your worth on it. And so I'm so passionate about getting to that core of, who is my soul? What does my soul want? And what is my ego telling me I want? That are all these masks that we put on. And it's the mind and, the just Band-Aid and the anxiety of, I need this, I need that, I need that to feel that.
Once I have this, I'll feel that. Once I have this, I'll do that. Once I'm this, whatever it is, I'll then finally blank. And that is a black hole thinking, because you'll never get there. If you can't be there right now in this exact moment, you will never get there. And your mind is tricking you into thinking that a handbag or a boyfriend or a job title or a degree is going to get you to that place, or losing 5 pounds or getting Botox or whatever it is. And all of those things can have a place in your life if you have that like steadfast sovereignty with yourself of like, this is who I am. But all of those things will just be Band-Aids, like you said, if you're using them as your identity, or the I'll be happy when blank.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's why bringing awareness to all these parts of yourself is so important, so that you can learn to discern, oh, I actually really just want that because I think it's going to give me this feeling. When actually, if I do the work, I can go deeper and see, oh, actually my soul just wants to feel seen, And so when you can peel back those layers and understand, why do I think I need this? Do I actually need this? Okay, well, what is it that I actually need?
Right. Yeah.
So subconscious work has been just beautiful in helping me recognize the difference in my soul, my intuition, who I really am,
who you truly are,
and the ego.
And what are some of the different examples of subconscious work you've kind of dove into? What has been helpful for you kind of in uncovering those layers of yourself?
Yeah, the two big ones are inner child work and shadow work. And again, I mean, most of our lives just go through life thinking this is how life is. This is the way it is. But through both inner child work and shadow work, I was able to see how past experiences have shaped my brain and my perception of the world. And then it takes away your identification with it, So I no longer was like, I'm scared, I am shy, I am not confident. It's like, no, those are things that I learned from certain experiences. They got programmed into my mind, into my body. And I can change that. I can rewire my brain. And I can also just see, like I said, this is a learned belief, a learned behavior, and I can unlearn it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so huge. And to recognize that you can end the sentence I am with anything you want, and you get to determine what it is you are and how often. And again, this is, all of our parents are doing the best they can with what they have, but having worked in pediatrics too, the amount of times I'll walk into a situation and the parent immediately is like, oh, she's really shy. She's actually just going to sit over here. Oh, she's really nervous. And I'm like, she's 2. She doesn't actually know what she is yet. She's listening to what you're saying, and you're now telling her she's really shy. You're telling her she's really scared. You hear about it all the time, like the kid in the dentist's office and the parent that's like, you're good, you're fine, you're brave. And then the parent that is like, okay, if this might hurt, mommy's going to hold your hand or daddy's going to be here. And it's like, our environment is giving us all these context clues, and we're these tiny little beings that are trying to absorb everything around us. And so if you are programmed to believe you are something, it's going to be requiring of your subconscious work and that inner child work to reprogram it, but it's so possible. And it's really amazing to have that empowering feeling that like I am blank, and blank can be anything I want to put in there. And so even just changing the words we're using around that and practicing and trying that on, like I'm fearless instead of I'm petrified of everything. It feels so much better to be fearless. And maybe it takes practice and it takes working and getting into some of those not so comfortable corners of our heart and our patterning to unravel. But it's really, really empowering to know that you can change. You almost like can change the past, at least the patterning of the past. Whereas so often we're told that you can't change it, just accept it, move on. And it's like, no, you kind of have to go back to it in order to move on.
Right. And one thing that's so interesting is your mind is so powerful. And just a simple visualization, your body doesn't know the difference between what you visualize and what actually happened. And so, yeah, you cannot change the past, but you can change your experience related to the past. And in a lot of the inner child and shadow work that I'll do is I'll go back to this memory that, was really traumatizing as a child and rewire it in a way that's empowering so that it is no longer holding me back. And it's not this woo-woo thing. It's you're actually changing your neural pathways in your brain to beliefs that are empowering and can allow you to actually be the person you want to be. Yeah. It's so powerful. It makes me so excited. Like I could talk about it for hours.
Yeah. I mean, and it's something that is often not fully either understood or dove into because so often we kind of just want to be eyes forward, look through the windshield. I'm like, what's the driver's side? Not the rearview mirror. Don't look back. You're not going that way. We hear all these things, and it's like sometimes in order to really be able to clearly see what's in front of you, you do have to pause and rewire some of those painful moments. And I will also say for anyone listening that is like, that sounds really freaking scary, so much more often than not, it is so empowering. And actually, if anything, there is an emotion I will tie that maybe can be uncomfortable to feel. And for me, it will be like a protective sadness because I'll go back to that little girl. And I have so many moments that when that kind of like fear that doesn't really feel like it belongs to me because it is kind of immature or childlike will come up in me, I will just like turn that little Mikhail that's facing out into the world and so freaked out that's sitting out on my knee, I'll turn her around to me and look at her and be like, we are good, we are safe. And that evokes an emotion, but it's not scary. It's compassionate and loving. And it's also allowing of us to remember that we were all once tiny little kids and infants that were dependent on every need being met by those around us. And so was everyone around us. And so I think that inner child work and shadow work can also give us so much grace to our parents, our elders, our relationships, our bosses, all the people in our life that maybe trigger us or bring these things up because every single one of us started as this like tiny little baby and often don't even have access to some of the tools to start unpatterning and reprogramming. And so it's really beautiful when we have the ability to. But I also feel so much grace for people that haven't quite gotten there or, aren't ready to because it's deep work for sure.
Yeah, and it can feel really overwhelming and just a lot. But one analogy I love is imagine your brain and your body as a garden and you want to fill it with all these empowering beliefs. I am strong, I am confident, all this stuff. You can do that until you're red in the face, but unless you look at the weeds, which we can look at as limiting beliefs, those weeds are still there, So you can plant these beautiful flowers and have this beautiful garden, but until you pull out the weeds and look at the limiting beliefs that are holding you back, they will still be there. Yeah. And what a lot of people may not know is your beliefs and your actions and your behaviors, 95% of them come from your subconscious. And so many people, think you're making these decisions and you're living life in this way, but a lot of people live life on autopilot and they don't recognize, oh, it's my subconscious that's actually driving this behavior, this emotion, whatever it is. And so when you can look into your subconscious with shadow work, with inner child work, you take your power back, because no longer are you living on autopilot. You take control of your life. You take control of your reality.
Yeah.
You have more control over your emotions. It's just so empowering. It's
Yeah, I love that garden analogy. And I think exactly as you said, you can spend and exhaust yourself in all the positive side of it, all of the light work, all of the affirmations. And often some of those weeds that are actually kind of easy to pluck and get out of there, but you're not tending to, will take over those flowers and they'll weave themselves through them. And, you know, exactly as you said, I mean, it just ends up being kind of this effort that was wasted in a lot of that light work. And so much of that releasing of those limiting beliefs and uncovering them and getting them out of there can also be really empowering, because often once you release them and really understand them and release them, they don't grow back. Sometimes they are those sticky little weeds that you pull out and then, you know, it's a little bit smaller, but it comes back and you pull it out again. And it is this practice. But there are tools, which I'm excited to get into with breath work in our conversation, that when you allow your body the kind of like somatic and visceral experience of releasing something, you often don't even have to know exactly what it is and exactly where it came from. Once you release it, it gets to be gone. And so that's a really beautiful thing too, because how much more could we sow within that garden, and how much more could we plant and grow if we didn't have all of these weeds that we're trying to like maneuver ourselves around. And that is part of the kind of constant practice that I think, again, can feel overwhelming. But if we do simplify it to the fact that like our brains are so powerful, 95% is subconscious, sometimes that thought can come up and we can just go, I'm done with that. Not today. That's not helpful to me. I always ask myself, who told me that? And if it was my own brain or my own self, or I don't actually know who told me like I'm not worthy enough to get this job. Oh, no one's actually ever told me that. I'm telling me that. So like that doesn't help me. Maybe just flip it, inverse it, and be like, I totally deserve this. I'm worthy of this. And it sometimes is as simple as that, like bringing awareness to it and then starting to change those thought patterns.
Totally. And I feel like a helpful mindset for that is knowing that one of the primary functions of your brain is to keep you safe. That's what it wants to do, right? It doesn't want you to be in danger. It wants to keep you alive. And our brain is so smart that we learn very quickly from the past, and it can perceive things as dangerous when really they're not, you know? And so that's when anxiety comes in and all these thoughts of saying, I can't do that, I can't do that, I shouldn't do that. You know, a lot of people have probably heard, don't believe everything you think. And it's so true. Your brain is here to protect you, keep you safe. It doesn't want you to feel embarrassed. It doesn't want you to feel shame. It doesn't want you to feel all these negative emotions. But what it doesn't realize is that in going into those difficult emotions is where you expand.
And sometimes it tricks you into thinking excitement, newness, something novel, something that you've never done before. It's different, it's new, it's now a danger. If we're not 100% sure what this job interview and new role might look like and we haven't lived it and we've lived in this safety net over here, why would we ever leave this safety net? And it's, you know, I say this all the time, we will often accept a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. So it's like what we know we will stay in, and even if it is painful and it is uncomfortable and it's not our dream life, we'll just stay in it and we'll keep doing the same thing every single day because our brain knows that as safety. And sometimes taking those big leaps and those risks and some of the things that happen to us, like a relationship ending that's unexpected, or having a loss or a death or a job ending or something like that that wasn't even our decision, but then becomes this major catalyst in so much change, because now we've just been chucked into this unfamiliar heaven, and we really can make it heaven. I really do believe we can make all of the paths that we walk so beautiful and so fruitful if we're brave enough to just stop doing it the exact same way we've been doing it just because it's the way we've done it. You know, it's that habit and that pattern that our brain, as smart as it is, unfortunately kind of likes to live in that. And so sometimes, you know, I'll even ask myself that if I'm questioning if it's anxiety, or am I just like maybe kind of excited? And this is just kind of a new thing that I'm I could flop. I could embarrass myself. It might not be perfect the first time around, but those feelings are worthy of taking up space in my brain rather than just like curling back up into comfort.
For sure. And I think part of the healing journey and the spiritual journey is really learning to recognize the difference in, is this anxiety something I should step through or is it not? You know, because there's duality in everything, right? And so one person can easily say, I feel anxious about this, I'm nervous about this, that means it's a no. But it's like, what's underneath that? Are you anxious because it's unfamiliar, or are you anxious because it's the wrong decision? Right. And that's where it's so important to be able to get out of the mind and kind of just drop into your body and your soul and learn what is like a really soul yes and a soul no versus an anxiety yes and an anxiety no.
Yeah,
you know?
It's huge. And it's so tied to our intuition and being able to start using that to drive the ship in a way that is so beneficial to us versus allowing anxiety to take the driver's seat and recognize we're on autopilot and just letting this thing take over in a way that is so non-serving to us and non-serving to our future. And a lot of times when I take a big leap or I do this crazy thing, the majority of the time, the feeling and thought that I have is like, man, I wish I had done this sooner. And it's so much working up to get to that point and to finally take the leap and to do the thing. And then I'm like, man, and how lucky are we that we're having this conversation in our 30s? Like, there are moments that I'm like, I'm so behind. And then I'm like, okay, Mikhail, get back to reality. You could be 85 on your deathbed and have not done any of the things that you're doing right now. And so I think perspective in that is also so helpful, because our brain's tricky way of keeping us where we are is also telling us we're too late. We've missed the ship. It's already sailed away. Everyone else has already done the thing. We could never blink. And it's like all of those thoughts also are so limiting because they just want to call us back into that comfort.
For sure.
Yeah. So with the breathwork aspect of it, you lead breathwork and also partake in some of that. How has that helped kind of evolve your personal journey, and like what has it done for you in being able to drop in and kind of be in your body?
Yeah. So I love breath work for very, very many reasons. The biggest thing I would say is I love that it allows me and anybody to get out of your mind. So often, you know, we know the things we should be doing. We should meditate. We should do this, do this, do this. But your mind is so powerful, and it can be really difficult to have it quiet down. And with conscious connected breathing, which is the breath work that I do, it really allows you to get out of your mind, get into your body, and get into your subconscious so that you can just have a break from the mind. And then when you do that, all these other incredible benefits come with it. And I mean, there's so many physical benefits, like it decreases inflammation, it reduces pain, it increases antioxidants, but I love it for like the mental health and the mental state side. And it is so powerful in allowing you to feel emotions that you didn't even know was there. No, were there. And I've never found another modality that can get me to feel emotions, release energy, and get into my body the way that breathwork has.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pairing it with a guided meditation or some type of exercise that also allows you to keep dropping in deeper. When I add breath work to that, it's the ticket for me having the experience where I am able to fully get in my body and release versus spending the entire time that I'm listening to this thing and just being in my head about it the whole entire time. And you know, sometimes if I'm a little more regulated, maybe I have a slightly different experience. But once I add breath work, immediately it's a game changer because it forces you to drop into your body. And so your amygdala and your stress responses and your nervous system cannot override it, because oftentimes with different types of breath work, you're already activating that sympathetic nervous system. And so your body itself like can't take over and be like, oh, but remember that thing you were supposed to be stressing about, because you're so connected with your own breath and your body and what's happening within it. And for release especially, I think it is just such a beautiful tool to access areas of your body that have been holding on to something for so long, and really truly allow it to like breathe life into that so that it can be released and let go.
For sure. And I would love to share my transformative experience with breathwork, because it's really what made me become so passionate about it. It was actually my second time doing breathwork. The first time I did it, I didn't have any magical experience. It's funny, I actually hated my first experience. And so it's such a lesson to me of always try something twice. Because initially I was like, I'm never going to do breathwork again. But I ended up doing it a second time. And this was right around the time of my breakup. And I was very depressed. I was extremely anxious. I was in a cloud, in a fog, and just nothing made sense. I didn't feel like myself. I couldn't make decisions. I was just so uncomfortable in my body. And I went into this breathwork session, and I had a full-on psychedelic experience, which I didn't know was possible without the use of drugs.
Right. It's crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And so that in itself was just wild. Like, I saw my third eye come out and expand. I was seeing all these floral paisley shapes, and I was in another world. And I came out of it and I was just like, that was the coolest thing I've ever experienced. And I was completely sober. But more importantly, I came out of it feeling light, clear. My anxiety was gone. I had this new like zest and energy for life. I felt so clear-headed. It was the first time I like really saw things in the breakup of like, this happened for a reason, and I'm so thankful for this, and everything makes sense, and I love the world. When an hour before I was polar opposite sides of the spectrum. And that's when I knew that breathwork is insanely powerful. And one thing I want to say about that is the biggest thing I've learned in facilitating breathwork is everyone is going to have their own experience, and you cannot put expectations on what's going to happen for you, because your body has the wisdom. I, as a facilitator, am a guide, but your body knows. And so, for someone that may have not tried breathwork, if you go into it with an expectation of, oh, I'm going to see my third eye, that's most likely not going to happen, right? But your body knows what it needs. And so it's important to go into it with as little expectation as you can. And also knowing that it can be so powerful and so moving.
Yeah, I think it's always so interesting, because I've done enough breath work now to be able to speak exactly on what you're saying, in a sense that there are sometimes I go into it and I actually feel like there's something I kind of do need to work through, or I would like to release, and my body is in such a protective state that I'm like kind of hovering on the top, and I still have a really beautiful experience, but it's like now's not the right time. And something that's interesting from that is even, our friend Morgan and you and I had done a somatic breath and sound experience recently. And during that actual experience, while I did feel some of the body vibration and fractals, and I had some of that kind of body experience with it, I didn't really feel the super profoundly deep emotional release. However, and I left even kind of being like, maybe I just like, I'm great. I don't know. It's all integrated and perfect. The next day I had like the craziest, most anxiety come out of me the next day. And I'm like, I think this was almost maybe like a delayed release of it. And also the body has the wisdom, in the sense that I then worked through it on my own and knew I have all the tools. I don't have to go to this space where it's curated and there's somebody there that is like giving me permission. I have this tool with me all the time. And so I can use it right now. And it was really difficult because I'm in the middle of a Monday and I'm trying to like push through and do all these different things and have these experiences and make plans I had said I was going to do. And the whole time it was like I was being invited to just like lose my shit. Like I felt so anxious. And so even that was really good wisdom for me to process as well, because it reminded me, exactly as you said, that we cannot have expectations around the experience, and we're never done. We're never going to reach the point where we just go through a breathwork practice and, the heavens open up and it's like you've reached this point where everything is just integrated and perfect and whatever. And then there are days where I don't really feel like I have anything that needs to surface, and I'll do breath work, and like I'm safe enough in that space where it unlocks a whole new layer of this crazy basement that I've been locked up in, and it allows that to release. And so I really agree with you. And, for anyone listening, I'm really excited because Natalie will be having breathwork offerings for the upcoming Red Nail Energy membership community. And I just want to really urge exactly what you said. Don't just try it once and have an expectation and not love it and then exit, but also be really patient and gracious with yourself, because our body does know what we need. And sometimes we've been so disconnected from our breath for so long that the first time we connect with it, our body is like, I don't know that I can really trust this. And the second time it's like, I still don't really know if I can trust this. But eventually, when we keep coming back to it and we keep giving it the understanding that like we're safe, we're not going to leave you here, we are protective of you, we'll finally get to that place where the ego can step aside and some of that subconscious can kind of be released. And so, yeah, it's a really, really powerful tool.
Yeah, I love it. And, I think another piece of that too, going off what you said, is really feeling safe where you're breathing. So whether you're going to an in-person group session or, like a virtual one, like the one I'm offering, it's important that you feel safe enough to let go, because that will allow you to have a much deeper experience, And so I always recommend people doing it, if they're doing it virtually, making sure no one's home, keeping the pets out. Like, it's a very, very, it can be intense emotional experience. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, my boyfriend's going to hear me cry or whatever, you can't drop in as much. And so that's such an important piece of really, just going back to awareness of, do I feel safe here? Do I feel safe enough to like really feel what I need to feel?
Well, and similarly to a psychedelic experience, the two most kind of important urged things are set and setting. So like, what mindset are you in and what setting are you in? And with breath work, because you are accessing levels of consciousness that we often aren't accessing during the day. I mean, we're all breathing all day to stay alive, but it is usually the most shallow, chest high up in our neck breathing that we can. And so to really even just create space to get some of that like diaphragmatic, deep breath into our body, it may be the first time we have taken breaths like that in years, honestly. And so I think, to echo everything that you're saying, I actually am really excited to have this offering and to allow people the ability to have some semblance of control over the setting that they're in, because while being in a group somatic breathwork experience can be so profound and so healing, because you not only have to release judgment for yourself, but for everyone else around you. And it is a very beautiful act of releasing shame and non-judgment and all of those things. I simultaneously feel like entering into and dabbling with breath work on your own terms in a way can be really powerful, because you can be wrapped up like a burrito in your bed, the safest place you've ever been. No one's home. No one's going to hear you. If you do want to like scream or pound on your mattress or cry or allow that release to come, or like, as I've had happen before, to laugh uncontrollably and you're crying because you're laughing so hard. I mean, there's so many different releases and expressions that can come up. But I think that sometimes to start it in a setting where you feel safe can be really, really cathartic and allowing of some of that transformation.
For sure. And I think it's also being very open and curious as to what you prefer, because every person I talk to has a different preference on how they like to do breath work. And most people actually prefer, just based on my experience, prefer doing it alone. But it's funny because I prefer doing it in a group.
Okay.
I feel so inspired when I can feel other people's energy around me. Like you mentioned, maybe you'll hear someone scream next to you, and it gives you this subconscious permission of, oh, I can scream too. And then you scream with them. Or maybe you're on the brink of like crying. You feel like you need to cry, but like you can't let it out. And then you hear someone crying and you're like, I can cry too. And you cry together. And it's this beautiful combination of energy where, you know, you can be really inspired by others. And with that, you know, you also have to be careful because there can be negative energies, there can be dark energies. And so one lesson that I very recently learned is the importance of protecting your own energy, especially for anyone that identifies as like an empath or has empath traits. That's myself. And so I can very easily take on energy.
Yes.
And I learned how important it is to, in going into a space like that where people are releasing so much stuff, protect your own energy. And you can literally just do that with visualization. You know, like imagine a bubble where only light and love can come in and no negative energy can enter, whatever. And then also bringing that to like a wider perspective of places like the gym. People release a lot of energy there, and being very aware of what energy is around you and where are people releasing energy that could come onto you. Because breath work is it's just such an emotional modality, experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. Are you comfortable sharing what it felt like, or kind of what keyed you in to know you had taken some of that dark energy, and then kind of what your practice was afterwards, since you maybe hadn't done that protective shield prior?
Yeah, that's a great question, because after I experienced it, I was just thinking about how many people must experience something like this and not recognize. But so I was feeling like pretty normal for me at homeostasis going into this breathwork session. I take that back. I had just gotten into a fight previously before that. I just remembered that. But overall, I was doing well. And going into the breathwork session, it was like, yeah, I know I had this fight, but it didn't feel heavy or anything. And I came out of the breathwork session. I actually felt pretty fine. But then the next day, I woke up and I felt just a depressive state. But it's interesting. It didn't feel like it was coming from inside me. It kind of felt like I was wearing this like coat or this cape of like just depression. And for the first half of the day, I just assumed I was in a bad mood. I was just in a mood, you know, we all have bad days. So I go to do the things that would normally take me out. I went on a walk, I went on a workout, or I went to my workout. I did a meditation, and things weren't pulling me out. The day goes on and I'm just like exhausted. I feel so drained, which is very unusual for me. I take a nap, which I never do. And I just remember feeling so heavy. And after most of the day had gone by, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, this is different than being in a bad mood. This is different than just a little anxiety. And so I had that awareness of this isn't normal for me. Even if I am feeling depressed or sad, it's a different depression and sadness. So what I did is I did a light meditation, and exactly like you were saying previously of, yes, we can go to these healing modalities, these practices in groups with healers, but I didn't have that. And I know that I can, you know, be a healer to myself to a certain extent. So anyway, I did a meditation where I brought in light and kind of had angels come surround me and remove any negative dark energy. And like I touched on before, it's all about intention, you know? And I did that for about 30 minutes, and having that light come in did remove that energy. And like right after, I felt better. But then I woke up the next morning and I felt totally back to normal. So that was a very interesting experience.
Very much so. And I think it's so empowering to know that when you are going through the day and it feels like there is this dark cloud or this heavy coat that's been placed on you, having the awareness to pause and say, this is not mine to carry. This does not belong to me. And it's a superpower to be so porous and so loving and open and receptive to be able to kind of transfer energy in a way, because that's also how we give our light as well. But to recognize the importance in protecting our own space, protecting our energy. It's almost like that second side of being empathetic, where for so much of life, it feels like everything's happening to you and you're absorbing everything and you can never wring yourself out and your pores are just filled with all of this stuff that doesn't belong to you. To then be able to have the awareness where you go through the day and you're like, something is really off. And again, you might not even know the exact moment. It could be the grocery store. Something just kind of attached, and you absorbed it, and then to recognize there are a lot of different rituals, and it sounds like, you'd gone through your normal things. Sometimes for me, the workout, the sweat session, the sauna, something will kind of help release it. But when it's still kind of clinging on, to not just power through and think this is mine to carry forever, but knowing that there are so many different modalities that we can use to really breathe light back into that space. And sometimes they're kind of ritualistic. Like, even if I buy something from a thrift store, I will like sage it, and before I bring it into my home, I'll just like set up a protective, energetic space of saying that, like, my home is so sacred to me. Nothing is welcome within it that is not light energy. And I've had experiences in the past where I have had very, very dark energy attached to my home, and it's still the same house I lived in. I didn't like burn it down and start over. I recognized you can always reclaim your power back. You can always reclaim your physical space, meaning your body, or the physical spaces that you are inhabiting, your home, your environment. And it just takes very dedicated intention and some of those rituals of really visualizing and creating those energetic boundaries. And so I think it's just important to echo that and to like not just make all of this work be so love, light, rainbows, and butterflies. Like, oftentimes there are spaces where somebody has deemed themselves a healer, and you should run for the hills. The minute somebody is saying like, come in this space, I have the answers, I will heal you, I will fix you, whatever it may be, because all of us have within us what we need. And so I think that with the best of intentions, we can find ourselves in spaces, whether it be in the wellness, healing arena, or like we said, just the grocery store, the gym, church, wherever you go, that people may be having these really big releases, and you have no idea how much you're absorbing and like how important it is to protect that and wring it out and set a boundary for what you're willing to have in your aura and not.
For sure. And that is all so, so true. And on the other side of the token, I think awareness is just so key in everything, but especially in this, of what you were just saying, maybe this is not mine. Maybe I gathered this from somewhere else, and I am powerful enough to release it, to let it go. And then the awareness comes in of, okay, well, maybe this is mine, and I need to do the inner work and decide or discover where this came from and transmute that, So it's like, it can go both ways. And the key is having this awareness. And that all starts with awareness of yourself, mindfulness of yourself, all the things, so that you are able to say, I can tell this is mine, or I can tell this is not mine.
Yeah, exactly. It's some of the shadow work or some of the dark work that does happen naturally and is just as imperative. It's the weeds. It's weeding those things out. And again, that's some of those weeds that don't belong to us that get placed within our garden are so, so, so important to have awareness to, because before we know it, we could, again, have our eyes set over here and we're growing the most beautiful garden we've ever seen. And just behind us, the whole rest of it is filled with these weeds that very well almost always don't belong to us. And yet they've just been placed there. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh my goodness. What do you think is kind of your universal lesson or a theme in your life that has repeated that you kind of feel like you've been placed here to learn?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of ways I could take this. The first thing that comes to mind is something we've kind of already touched on, but just really the importance of self-worth. Going back in time and looking at all my past relationships, whether it's romantic or friendship, whatever, have seen this pattern of me needing others for this and for that. And it's taken 30 years for me to recognize I am here to learn my power. I am here to learn what it feels like to actually feel worthy and not just say I'm worthy, because there's a difference. And I think there's an important difference too of liking yourself and loving yourself. They're two entirely different things, because for years I would say, yeah, I like myself. Yeah, of course. But when you really go deep, it's like, do you really? And that has been my journey of how can I build myself up instead of using others to build me up? So I think that's, and now I feel so passionate about helping others discover their power and their source and their light, you know? And because I've seen what it feels like to be on one end and have no idea who the hell you are and need others to feel good versus now building up internally and feeling strong from the inside.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful gift to give yourself first and foremost. And then once you really can stand firm in the answer of like, hell yeah, I love myself. I love myself, especially in a society where we're kind of told you're not supposed to. Like if somebody says you look beautiful, you should shut it down with like, oh, well, thank you, but, or, oh, you know, it's
or,
like,
no, you look beautiful.
no, you look, exactly, like pass it back to them. And I just think that it's such an important thing to not only think about like raising super strong women that are empowered and emboldened and not so concerned with what everyone else thinks that they should be, but like recognizing that that work and that ability to give that gift to others has to start with ourselves. It has to start with embodying that. And exactly as you said, there is a big difference in just staring in the mirror and being like, I love myself, I'm worthy, I'm great, and then going on with your day, and actually like staring yourself into your eyes and your soul and having that emotion come up of like, I love you, you are worthy. There's such a difference in meaning it versus just saying it. And so yeah, I think, you know, anyone listening, that's such a great takeaway too of what you can do today. Every day there's like an invitation to find that love and find that radical self-acceptance, unapologetically loving yourself in this exact moment. Not when, not tomorrow, not when this thing is completed, you know, not when so-and-so chooses you, but right now, because I really do believe that that is the most important work and the most important commitment we'll ever make is to ourselves first. And then once that commitment is made, it opens the door to so many opportunities and so much possibility that is being chosen from such a more concrete and secure place.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it goes into that idea of magnetism. And, you know, once you are feeling good about yourself, people can feel that energy. And then all these beautiful things start coming to you because you're attracting them. Your frequencies are literally matching. And it's this beautiful thing. But, you know, another thing I want to say is it's such a journey and it's such a process. I'm not sitting here saying I feel 100% worthy 100% of the time. I'm still working on that, you know, but it's been this journey of seeing, oh, I used to be here where I didn't feel worthy, and slowly building it up. And it will continue for the rest of my life. And then it'll transform into something else that I need to work on. And there's always something. But it's just, it's a journey.
Yeah, it is. And it's fun to be able to be kind of curious and playful with the work as well. I know that there's heavy topics discussed on this podcast, and the conversations I have are so magnetic and aligned and empowered. And I also think it's so important to bring play and curiosity and pleasure into the work that we're doing and not just have it be so hyper-focused on like, let me get deep into these like really tarry, shadowy aspects of myself. And like, as you said, after we do that work, the feeling we should have in our body is light. It should feel like airy and flowy and light versus going down into those really scary spots or those more maybe shadowy parts and then just living there. I mean, that's really not the point. It's breathing light into them. It's allowing it to become something that is no longer an anchor around our ankles, but instead is this thing that we recognize has not been serving us. We can breathe light into it, release it, and then feel lighter, better, more just playful and curious as we continue this journey. And then everything that we continue to navigate, because as you said, we're never there, it's never finished, but we can then look at it with such a more light-filled and curious and playful lens versus like, oh God, what's around the corner? You know, it's fun, really worthy work when you allow it to be that.
And I think to your point, so much of the purpose to doing this deep work is so that you can experience more joy, more pleasure, more bliss. Because once you weed out the weeds, you don't have this stuff in your mind of like living there and being like, well, what if that? What if that? Oh, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to look weird. It's like once you take out those weeds, you can live life in this more freeing way and just literally be who you came here to be, who your soul truly is, and give zero fucks.
Right. Yes, 100%. And be the highest vibration, which is authenticity. When you are living in authenticity and you are living in alignment with who you actually are, and you do the work to figure out who that even is, it is something that is palpable to the people around you. It is a quiet confidence that does not scream. It does not have to tell you how great it is. It is something that you can feel because it's so embodied, and then it's in turn so magnetic, and it's something that people want to be around, people want to emulate. It gives people permission to be more themselves. And so I think it is a really beautiful aspect of the work, is being exactly who you are. Yeah, for sure. What would you say your personal version of Red Nail Energy is?
I love that question. I think my version of Red Nail Energy would be making the choice, making the decision to not be a version of yourself that has been molded and created by conditioning, patterning, wounding, and making the choice to do the work so that you can create a reality that you want, so that you can literally be and embody the version of yourself that you want to be. So it's that choice of, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to be the victim. I have a choice, and I'm going to do the work to get to where I want to be.
I love, love, love that. And then you own your future. And what an incredible place to be at, where life is not happening to you any longer.
Exactly.
You are happening to life. You are determining where those next cards are going to fall. And so often we are patterned and conditioned to be like, here's the cards you're dealt, figure out how to play them. And it's like, oh, wait, I can put these down. I don't have to carry these. I can pick up a whole new set of cards. I can paint my own cards. You know, I think it is a choice. And I feel as though that is exactly Red Nail Energy. So I love that answer. Before we close, is there anything else intuitive or on your heart that you feel called to share with listeners?
I want to share a quote that resonates so deeply with me, and I may butcher it, so I apologize.
Okay.
And it actually comes from a Christian text, and I'm not religious at all, but it really stood out to me. I think it's from the Gospel of Thomas, it might be called.
Okay.
So I'm going to try. And the quote goes something like, if you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you.
Ooh, chills.
And I love that because I think you can take multiple perspectives in looking at it. You can look at it from a narrow perspective of, if my boss said something to me and I got triggered and upset and I don't let that emotion, that energy out of my body, it will build, it will manifest in other ways, it will stay within me. And that eventually will destroy you, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADHD, whatever. That stuff builds. You can also take a macro perspective in the sense of, you might have this quiet intuition that I know I'm supposed to do something bigger. I know I'm supposed to leave this relationship. I know I'm supposed to do whatever. If you don't listen to that, it stays within you and it will eventually destroy you. It could take weeks, months, years, decades, but you have to listen to what's within you and allow it to come out.
Yeah, so powerful. And the beauty on the other side of the coin of letting it out will save you. And so it's such a really beautiful quote, because it isn't fear-based in just like, be scared of being destroyed. It's like, be so rejoicing and excited in the fact that what is within you can save you. And then exactly as you said, if you are too fearful, too scared, too shameful, whatever it may be, that you have to keep it locked up and don't let it out, you're drinking poison. Like, it will stay within you, and little by little it will destroy you. And that is, I think, a perfect note to end on. I really love that. And I think that anyone listening that has that quiet whisper, I feel that's been a theme in quite a few of the conversations I've had, that it's kind of ended that way, where when I say that, I feel like everyone listening has something that pops up into their mind, and they know it. You know it. We're the only things in our own way. And so whatever that is, let it save you. Let it be the thing that connects you with other people. Let it be the the passion and the purpose that gets you out of bed in the morning. Let it be the thing that starts to allow you to drive the ship rather than letting it be driven by all of these other things that have been driving it for far too long. And sometimes it means taking a really big leap or making a really scary change. And at the same time, it is often that very moment that you make that decision to make the change that does save you and becomes the domino that sets all the rest of them off.
And one last thing I'll say
Yes.
is I think the things that we need to listen mostly to are the softest, quietest whispers, because that is your intuition and that is your soul. And it's so easy to just listen to the mind because the mind is loud.
Yeah.
But the stuff that's deep within you, that's actually you, those are the whispers. So you have to listen to those.
Yes, yes. Listen to your whispers, Red Nail Energy community. You are so loved and so seen and celebrated, and we support every tiny little whisper your heart might be saying. And the biggest thing we both send you off with is that we hope you will pause and listen. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been an amazing conversation. Stay tuned because, like I said, Natalie will be offering some breath work, and I just can't wait to bring her into this beautiful community we've created. I will link in the show notes all the ways that you can connect with Natalie if you would like to continue the conversation, and we will catch you on the next episode.